welcome. I hope everyone is beginning to join us from around the Baltimore-Washington annual conference. I see we have a number of participants who are showing up. Welcome to Worship Beyond the Walls, moving to online. We'll give people a few minutes as they're beginning to log in to the webinar today. Just want to make sure you all knew you were in the right place. We'll turn that screen share off for a second. As we're seeing people log in, I'll just take a moment to introduce myself, and then we'll have the panel introduce themselves. I am Bill Brown. I'm the Director of New Faith Expressions for the Baltimore-Washington Conference, part of the Leadership and Congregational Development team, and together we have put tonight's webinar together for you all. Just a couple of things you'll note. As you're looking at your own controls, you'll see a chat feature. The chat feature has been disabled for tonight's webinar. So if you have questions or would like to interact with the panelists, you can put in your request on the Q&A feature, and throughout the evening we'll be answering your questions sometime at the end of some of our sections, sometime during the webinar, so you can ask questions there. And I'd like my colleague, Dr. Smothers, to let him introduce himself.
I'm Rod Smothers, Director of Leadership and Congregational Development. I serve along with Bill and Lauren Harris, and it is our pleasure to be facilitating this event tonight with several of our colleagues in the annual conference. And I think it's going to be an exciting conversation about how we can continue to be present in many ways. And so we are glad that you have joined us tonight.
And I'm just going to work around my screen and ask Terry to go next.
I'm Terry Kofiel. I serve Epworth Church in Cockeysville, and I chair the Communications Commission for the conference.
And Matthew.
Hello, my name is Matthew. I am the Director of Worship and Creative Arts at Bethany United Methodist Church in Ellicott City, Maryland.
Wonderful. Chris.
I am Chris Bishop. I serve at Faith Point United Methodist Church as their lead pastor, and we are a mobile ministry, and I also am one of the pastors at Common Table, which is our online campus community.
And we'll stick with that theme. Ben.
Hey everybody, my name's Ben Trawick. I'm the worship leader at Faith Point United Methodist Church, and I'm also the campus pastor for the Common Table Online, which is an online church that is built from the ground up for the internet. And yeah, happy to be here.
Micah.
Hi everybody, I'm Micah Jones. I am the webmaster / video producer or media producer at the conference center.
And we have two special guest panelists. Eric.
Hi there, good evening. I'm Eric Alsgaard. I am the managing editor for the Baltimore-Washington Conference. I do social media, web content editing, you name it. I'm here tonight to listen in and to write a story about what teaching and learnings people are sharing here tonight, and what questions people are asking as well. Thank you.
And I always save the best for last, Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa Lauber. I'm Director of Communications with the Baltimore-Washington Conference. I'm thrilled to be here, and just welcome everybody. I'm looking forward to tonight.
So as you can see, friends, we have a wonderful panel that has been gathered tonight to begin answering questions and helping you imagine what online worship can look like in the immediate and hopefully in the long term. But before we go any further, I've asked Reverend Smothers to open us with a word of prayer.
Loving and gracious God, we give thanks today for the privilege of being able to gather by this meeting. we are aware that our brothers and sisters, both in small gatherings, medium gatherings, and larger gatherings, are all wondering what's next. How do we continue doing ministry in ways that we can be in touch with those who we are entrusted to care for? How can we reach out to those in our community who still need the church and ministry and mission? And how can we find ways to support ministry when we are not physically gathering in a single place? We pray that you will speak through us tonight and that it is your wisdom that will be revealed as we share our experiences, our learning, our hope, and the promise that we will together find ways to move forward and create excitement in new ways for our congregations. May this time have an anointing on it that touches us in every part of our being. We pray especially for those who have joined us, and we pray that this word will not only be revelation, but impartation for the days ahead. These and all things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. So for those who are joining us for the webinar tonight, I have some questions for you to answer to help us get to know you. So you're going to see some polls that are going to get launched, and just answer them, and we'll reveal to each other who we are. So let's just start with an easy one. Let us know if you're laity or clergy. So you can, I feel like American Idol, you can vote now. We'll give that a minute, then you'll be able to, pardon me, one of our panelists is trying to.
I got him.
You got him? Good. All righty. About 80% of you have voted. I want to give you a few more seconds. We don't want anyone to feel left out. Okay, we're going to close that voting. Let's see who's out there. Excellent. So 56% of our participants tonight are lay people. So welcome. Excited to see that. I see a couple of you have raised your hands. That's wonderful. The easiest way for you to get our attention or to ask questions is to use the Q&A feature. The chat feature has been disabled for this evening. So if you have a question, feel free to use the Q&A feature. Let's go with our next question. Since I can find it. I'm just curious as to where people are from. So which district are you from? Find your district. You can pick one answer. Let's see where you are from our annual conference tonight.
Bill, could you have some dramatic music when you reveal the poll results? That would help me to feel a little bit more engaged.
What if I drum roll on my desk?
Good. Yeah. I got nothing for you, Chris. So I believe Matthew is our musician. So I don't want to, I don't want to tell anybody, tell him what to do.
What kind of music are we looking for here?
I think he's messing with us. All right, let's see. Not that this is a competition, but let's see who has the greatest attendance. Little hint, Greater Washington. Wow, by 25%. But it is nice to see that all of our districts are represented tonight. It's also good to see, I know some of you are joining us via the internet. I know some of you are joining us by phone. If you are joining by phone, I do apologize. You can't participate in the poll. But we are still glad you're here and hope that you will still participate. You just have the joy of you don't have to look at any of us. You only have to hear. So that's the bonus for you if you're just joining us by telephone tonight.
Bill, we have a couple of folk who are having difficulty. We want to give them a couple of minutes, and one of them is our panelist who can see us, but he can't see himself.
Thank you very much, Rodney. We are using a feature tonight that Zoom provides called Webinar. And in the webinar feature, unlike a Zoom meeting, you can only see us. We cannot see you. Therefore, you also cannot see yourself. So there's nothing wrong if you're trying to see yourself or you're trying to see other participants in this type of feature to allow greater interaction and greater participation. We're using the webinar feature. So fear not. Here's how you can engage. Our next question. Prior to March 15th, did your church offer online worship? Take a moment to vote now. Okay.
Okay, Ben, this is your drum roll moment.
I want to hear a drum roll. Here we go with results 3. Wow. So 77% of you did not offer online worship prior to March 15th. So this is just showing us that the current situation in which we find ourselves with the COVID-19 has pushed us all into a situation and into a realm that we may or may not have been ready for. And I'm going to answer one question online to our friend Amanda, who asked how we define online worship. And I am defining it. Yes, recorded and posted worship does qualify because you are offering an online presence for somebody to be able to do on-demand worship. So yes, if that would change your vote, I'm sorry. Let's see. But this will be able to help you. After all of this is over, after the restrictions have been lifted, will you continue to offer online worship? And to clarify, that does include if you record and then post to some platform later on. All righty, let's get a drum roll, please, Matthew. All right, you have to unmute your microphone. It doesn't work really well. All right, so 56% of you said yes, you want to continue to offer online worship after this is over. And for those who you're not sure, I understand this is a brave new world for many of us. And not knowing is an okay place to be. As I heard in a webinar this week, however, that innovation is born out of crisis. And so it is great that so many people are trying to embrace this moment. I've got one more question and then we'll introduce our latest panelist. Last but not least, just to help us all out, which platform is your church currently using? You can select all that apply. Which online platform are you using currently? All right, I'm gonna give this a couple of people are still voting. Looks like it has slowed down, so we're gonna end that poll and here's our final share. looks like the top three are close to the top three. So Facebook Live and Zoom and YouTube Live. For those who are using the other, if you would please, if you're able, in the Q&A feature, please let me know what that other is. I'm always trying to expand my resources. So if you can share in the Q&A what your other is, that would help us as we continue to develop resources at the annual conference level. And we are done with the polls. I'd like to welcome our latest panelist, Reverend Daryl Williams. You could just say hi and tell us where you're from, Daryl.
Hi, I'm Daryl Williams. I'm the pastor of St. Paul Church in Oxon Hill. Sorry, I was jumping from one Zoom to the other and clicked the wrong link. So, hey, everybody.
Hey.
All righty. So those who have jumped in, we've got some people are using freeconferencecall.com. Others are using Skype. Some are just streaming via their website, WebEx. Google Meet, that's another one. Okay. A lot of the free conference call and phone call. So excellent. Thank you all very much for answering that. And that just kind of moves us into that conversation about the different platforms. You can see there's a lot that is out there. People have talked about Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Instagram Live. I've seen a resurgence, if you haven't seen Periscope. I haven't heard about Periscope for a number of years. It's all of a sudden popped back into vogue now. Google Hangouts, Google Meeting, WebEx. A lot of people have been asking Rodney and I why the conference has been really behind this push to use Zoom. And I'll talk and let Rodney talk a little bit about that. But one of the reasons is what you can notice with Zoom, particularly in the meeting feature. When you're doing a Zoom meeting, you can have the opportunity to see everybody. So if you're that kind of person who likes to have facial feedback, particularly if you're preaching, Zoom provides that. What I also like about Zoom is it gives us the opportunity to use it for Bible studies, for meetings, for one-on-ones, and it is not limited by your computer technology or lack thereof. So what I've noticed in our participants tonight, we have a predominance participating via Zoom, online, through the internet, but a number of you are calling in. And so what I like about this feature is if you have a landline, if you have a cell phone, if you have an iPad, it's just so many different devices you can use to still participate in some way with the Zoom call. And even better yet, I like that it's free. Yes, there are some limits to the free, but for the most part, the free component can handle just about everything we need to do as church and still provide us with some face-to-face interaction. Reverend Smothers, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, in addition to that, if you're trying to introduce this to your congregation, and you can use it for board meetings, for Bible studies, for a number of things, it is easy for persons who are not used to doing using this type of technology to adopt, because you send them an invitation, they basically press one or two buttons and they're connected, and it's scalable. So from there you can increase the features, and there are a lot of other things that you can do, and particularly when you are going to be a mobile pastor, and all of us are, and the things that you still have to do. You're still going to have church meetings. You're still going to have to check on the sick and shut in. You're still going to have to collaborate with other colleagues and with the conference and things like that. So it has a number of uses in addition to worship. So remember back in the days before we had cell phones, smartphones, we had beepers. No, let me look at this crew again. No, half these folk in here don't even know what a beeper is. But back in the day, you had a beeper. It was a little thing you wore on your hip, and people would buzz you, and their number would come up, and you would go back and call them. But we innovation came along. Same thing with Zoom. Zoom is a platform that has continued to improve, continue to adapt, and is just easy to use. It's easy on the budget, as Bill has said as well. So many of the people that are here tonight are going to talk not only about Zoom, but some of the other things that are out there, because particularly if you have senior citizens or people who are not necessarily comfortable with using a computer, an iPad, or a tablet, or a phone, then we're going to also talk about some other options as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rodney. I'm kind of answering questions. I also see some of our panelists are picking up on questions. So that's wonderful. So that's where we are. There's a lot of wonderful platforms that are available. Looking through some of the ones you all have been posting with podcasts and free conference call and the different streaming services. That's excellent. Use that creativity. Now we are getting a lot of questions. We'll just move into this about technology and equipment placement and all the other fun stuff. I've invited Micah Jones to the table tonight because that is kind of his area of expertise. I know others on the panel have it as well. So Micah, teach us everything we need to know in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of education about equipment.
All right. So it's too much to get into specifics. There's a lot of learning that has to be done, but I just want to assure you, this is not terribly difficult once you get your mind wrapped around what's going on. When it comes to video, the basic principles of composition and lighting, all that's the same as photography. So if you're familiar with that at all, you're going to have an easier time transitioning. But the first thing I want to say is you don't have to spend a lot of money to get good results. I think the first thing people want to do is they want to go out and buy all this new equipment. But the reality is, if you don't know how to use the equipment you have, buying new equipment won't make your production any better. So you have to work to maximize what you have before you really begin to look at going out and expanding, because it's easy to spend a lot of money, but just because you spent money doesn't mean you're going to increase your production value. So if we're talking about, I guess I have to go over real kind of bird's eye view here. The first thing you're going to want to look at doing is looking at what you have on hand and working on things like lighting. What kind of lighting do you have? How are you using your lighting? Is everything bright enough? A webcam like the one I'm having, one that we're all using right now on our laptops, if it doesn't have enough light, it's going to start to look grainy. The image is going to get degraded. And before you go out and buy a new camera and spend that money and invest it, look at how you're lighting the situation. Look at how the scene is lit and if there's enough light. Audio. I would encourage you to, before you jump in and buy a $500 microphone, go and see if you can buy a lavalier microphone on B&H Photo or Adorama.com or Amazon. Find something that's going to be compatible with your device and use that, because buying a $500 microphone with no knowledge of how to use it effectively is just going to be throwing away a bunch of money. If we're talking about learning, those two sites that I talked about, B&H Photo and Adorama, both have good technical advice. And in fact, B&H, I know you can call and ask for advice. Probably don't want to do that unless you're buying something, but they will walk you through more specific. So the part of the problem with doing it is there's no one size fits all solution. Every church is going to be different. Every building's different. The acoustics in one building are not going to be the same, even, in the sanctuary and the fellowship hall. So there's no one size fits all plan. so it has to come from dealing with the situation and kind of really looking at the specifics of what you have. There are a lot of options though, and there are cheap options. I don't want to discourage anybody. You can buy little tiny audio interfaces. So you could plug in the microphone you use on the podium into your iPhone, you know. You can get those, I think, for less than $100. The other thing I was doing today, I was looking at some of the websites where I was going to offer some suggestions for the immediate time, but the reality is with the crisis as it is, most of my suggestions that were budget friendly are not available. I kept looking at different things and seeing, you know, on back order. So really you have to kind of figure out what you're doing with the equipment you have right now. And I think that's going to be the biggest takeaway that I want you to have, is figure out what you're doing with what you have before you go and try to get something else.
So Micah, let me see if I've got this right. If I just have my phone,
yeah,
I can use the camera on my phone to go to Zoom. Would I need, would it be helpful to have a tripod for my phone, or should I just hold it? Do I need a microphone?
You know what? You could get a tripod and spend the money, and that certainly wouldn't be money poorly spent. But if you don't have access to a tripod, and let's say we're in a situation like we are now, where you know, everything's back ordered, and so it's going to be hard to get a hold of one. You can take your phone and prop it up on a pew. You can find some way to prop your phone up, and it's not the best solution, but you can even have it, as long as you don't necessarily want to handhold it, because you're going to get a lot of shakiness. But as long as you have it propped up on something fairly solid, you know, that'll be a good stopgap until you can get a tripod.
If I can add something with that, with my cell phone, when I've done conversations that way, business card holder is a great place to brace your cell phone.
Yeah.
Desk, and it keeps it from moving, and you don't look like the Blair Witch Project when you're doing worship.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we have some questions, but
I'm gonna go through some of the questions just to answer them all. If I know some people have answered them. So somebody asked Micah and Ben, where do you put a camera? Particularly, it's really easy now. Nobody's in the pew, but I want to continue to do online worship. Where should I mount a camera?
Ben, do you want to take that one, or?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. That's a great question, because you'll see all kinds of things. Micah touched on kind of composition, and that is this idea that you want to direct the viewer's eye to the place in the frame where you want them to look. So usually it's a good idea not to have your camera all the way at the other end of the room, because you're just in this immense negative space then. So you want to have you as the speaker, if you are recording yourself, take up the majority of kind of 1/3 of that frame, which will give you a nice medium shot for a speaker. For a talking head, that's where you want to be.
I'm in a sanctuary where we have multiple camera angles, and we had to stop that because just what Ben was saying, you know, you just see this big cavernous space without people in it. So we have put an extra camera on a tripod very close to where we're sitting. And I've noticed, you know, people are doing things in different ways. Some people are trying to do standard worship with vestments and everything else. And I think one of the things we also did was we went from a live stream to pre-recording the service to try to deal with some of these issues ahead of time. Because usually I have a pretty big crew that works on our video production, and we can't have them in the church right now. So we have people doing multiple jobs. So it's easier, I think, sometimes to record it ahead of time That way, you know, if you have some big glitches, you have some ability to re-record parts of the service to make it a little bit better.
Excellent. Now, oh, I just lost the question. Somebody's asking a lot of questions about microphones, Micah, particularly what do you mean by lavalier mic?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Things like that. For those who may not know, what do you mean?
So a lavalier mic is a small microphone that's gonna be able to clip onto your clothing, usually around your collar, and it's gonna be a little tiny microphone that's either wired or wireless, and it's gonna give better quality sound than your phone, the built-in microphone on your phone. Part of the thing you want to understand is you want your microphone to be about as close as you would be talking to somebody. So when you have a microphone set up, you don't want it to be set up far away, because what ends up happening is you start to hear all the room noise. Basically, if you're in an echoey room, you start to hear all the little echoes and the reverbs, and it becomes muddy and not clear. A good microphone placement is going to be, for a lavalier, is going to be on the collar or on the chest, somewhere where it's going to be closer than your phone would be. There are different kinds of microphones. I mean, you're probably used to, a lot of churches have a podium microphone that is just kind of set up in front of the pulpit. There's handheld microphones. There's shotgun microphones, all kinds of microphones. The good news is you can get interfaces that will go with cell phones or your computer for basically anything you want, right? And that's great, but that's also part of why it's hard to be specific, because if you have a microphone with the standard microphone plug, which is XLR, it's a little circle with 3 little prongs in it. You know, you need something that takes an XLR. Yeah, Chris Bishop is holding up one right now. You need something that takes that wire can plug into, that can then be used to plug into your computer.
I'm going to back you up a second, Micah.
Yeah.
For those without our audio engineering degree, what is an audio interface? What's an audio interface?
An audio interface is something between the microphone and your computer or your phone that converts, because when you speak into a microphone, you're creating an analog signal. That audio interface takes that analog signal and converts it to a digital signal, and then allows you to plug that into your computer, where your computer can then read that digital signal. So it's a lot of jargon, but basically all you really need to know is an audio interface allows you to take your microphone and plug it into your computer. Now, there are microphones that have audio interfaces built in. Again, there's so many options that it's hard to be specific. So you could get a USB microphone that you can plug directly into your computer, and it has an interface built in.
I think it's important too to remember that you have folks in your congregation who understand and speak this kind of language, and a lot of them are under 20 years old. And so if you don't have the technical knowledge, ask folks in your congregation rather than saying nobody here would do that. One thing that has astounded me is the number of senior citizens who regularly use our YouTube channel to check into worship if they're not able to be there. So don't think this is just an ageism thing, but you do have folks in your congregation who speak techie and who can set this stuff up for you faster than you can probably learn it on your own.
And you would be surprised who that is.
Yep.
I want us to tackle some of the questions that are already loaded, because we'll never get to them at the rate we're going.
Yeah.
So I want to remind our panelists that you have the ability to look at the Q&A. And if there are some questions in there that you particularly want to tackle because of your expertise and experience, then please feel free to either answer live or type an answer, so that our folks, some of the questions have been about basic stuff, so I've been typing answers to folks. The more advanced ones, I'm going to leave to our panelists so that they can respond. So we have a question from Dana that says, we're on Zoom and really want to add some music to our worship, but we either have trouble with sound quality or finding music that can be legally used. Are some platforms better at music than others?
You have two good questions. Let's hold the legality for a little bit later, but I know I'm going to call out Matthew just because I've been watching his services some on Sundays, and your sound quality is pretty good. So how are you getting such good sound quality on your live broadcast on Sundays?
OMG. I wish I had my device with me. So actually it's if I knew I was going to answer this question, I would have had it with me, but
I knew it was going to be asked. I would have told you to bring it.
But it's called in, so I love that Micah brought out the point about doing things really simple, because that's exactly what we did. And we were looking at trying to buy equipment and stuff. We had been thinking about live streaming for some time. But when this kind of forced us into it, we just went really simple. I had an iPad. I said, let's just Facebook Live. And so it became a question of how do we get people to actually hear what we're doing at a good quality? And so that's when I started looking at trying to link something from our soundboard to my iPad so that people can hear what we're doing very clearly. And I came across this device. It's called an iRig. It's called an iRig, and I'll actually screen share with you. While he was talking, I was looking up some devices, some audio interfaces to show you. But it's an iRig, and you connect it to you send a link, you send a cable from your soundboard to the iRig, and you plug it into your iPad, and that is what, and it has a gain function on it, and that will give you a decent sound. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been good enough for people to hear what's going on.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Matthew, because you're going to answer two questions with one answer. Could you screen share for us?
I could screen share. I'm gonna pull up the device right now.
So for those who have been asking, how do I show a video? How do I show words during a Zoom feature? There's a feature on the Zoom webinar and the Zoom meetings called screen share. So Matthew, go ahead if you can.
Okay, I'm pulling it up now, and I got it off of here. I'm screen sharing it now. I got it, and it was $40, and I couldn't believe how cheap it was.
All right, so hopefully that's going to pop up. Okay, so everyone on the who is on with a webinar, you can now see what's on Matthew's computer.
Right. So this was $40, and can you see this?
Oh, I can.
Yes.
Yeah, this was $40. It was really cheap. I went to, we ordered it, but when I saw how cheap it was, I went to Guitar Center and bought it myself for myself in my home studio, and so that I could do stuff at home, because we don't know how this thing is going to progress. So yeah, that's it. And they have other versions of it that are more expensive, but this was a quick, easy.
Can you explain in very simple terms what this does for folks?
Yeah. So if you look at the device here, right, where the guitar is where an instrument or a line or a mic or a line from your soundboard would go. And then this part here, this 3.5 millimeter, am I saying that right, Micah? 3.5 millimeter jack would go into the headphone jack of your iPad. And it's that simple. It's that simple. Or your phone, if you have an iPhone. Now, if you have a later model of an iPhone, you will have to get that adapter for headphones that they have. But it's just as simple as putting your feed in here, wherever you're bringing your sound in from, in this part here, and then putting this part into your device. I tried using the earphone to monitor what was going on, but it didn't work for me. Maybe it's a user error, but for me to monitor what everything was sounding like, I had to get on the live stream itself. So, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And that
And then also some, I mean, and then some audio interfaces. If I could, you know, this little thing, a lot of people use this little thing in their home studios. And it's just a two channel board there, and it works just as good as having a soundboard, you know. And then also, if I could jump out of screen share for a second, stop sharing. Here we go. Then I have this little guy that I use in my studio. This was $150 as well, but it's 4-channel and it has stereo, and so it works, you know, and it's not that expensive.
Excellent. And I would say, and I'm just I'm not going to give out panelists emails, but if the panelists are willing to answer questions offline that people have, if you send your questions to me at bbrown@bwcumc.org, I will try to forward them to our panelists, because I know just looking through our list of questions that are coming in already, there are some very specific questions that we don't want to get bogged down in tonight, but some of our panelists may be able to answer them later on offline. So a couple of questions that have come in that are with some of the tech questions. For some things, like Helen is asking, is there a way to save recorded meetings so that people can access them later by dialing in from a phone? I don't have an immediate answer for you, Helen. What I would recommend is going to zoom.us. I know you can save recordings. I just don't know if you can dial in on a phone for recording. So check at zoom.us, and their support pages and their tutorials are excellent, and they should be able to.
Bill, why don't we ask some of the other panelists? Maybe they have an answer to that question.
Not everyone at once, panelists.
I'm sorry, what was the question? I was answering other questions in the chat here.
Can a Zoom recording be saved that you can dial in and listen to over the phone?
I don't know.
Not to my knowledge. You could record the Zoom meeting though, and then post it to YouTube or Facebook, and people could get, rewatch it on demand that way.
Right, and that's also answers another question. Roy's asking about live captioning, and I know with Zoom, for live captioning, you actually have to have a person present who is typing as people are speaking. But one of the workarounds that people have done is to record the Zoom recording and then post it to YouTube, and YouTube will add closed captionings after the fact. So that's just kind of a workaround that people have used to get the closed captioning in. Okay, let's move on to I know technology and equipment's a big question, but I wanted to really get into content and provide some opportunities for people to talk about content. And this has come up a couple of times. Should we do this live, or should we do this recorded and posted later on? Panelists, who wants to tackle that first?
Well, since I brought that up before, we had gone from live with multi-cameras and a big staff to do it to a very small staff of people, and we changed the camera angle. We also changed the way we structured worship a little bit. We still did the standard liturgy, and we have the ability, because of our system, that we could project PowerPoint. So we continue to run our PowerPoint. So we encourage people to do the responsive readings with us. We had a liturgist and pastor or preacher. But we tried to make it in a smaller area. And I know some folks are moving, if they have a chapel, or even moving out of their sanctuary into a smaller room, setting up a worship space that is worshipful, that's comfortable looking, and doing things on a smaller scale. And I think that's helpful in this situation to make it seem a little bit more natural than looking through an empty sanctuary. Also, when you're in an empty sanctuary, it changes the acoustics drastically. So it'll change what your microphones are picking up or not picking up because there's nothing there to absorb the sound. And I think recording ahead of time helps you deal with some of these things. So we had some times where the microphones were just squealing or not picking up or things like that because we didn't have a sound person available. And that's one of the reasons we went to recording it ahead of time instead of doing it live, because that took out some of the crazy stuff.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Well,
I think that
with when you record live versus doing a direct live stream is that recording ahead of time gives you a backup plan. One of the things that you'll run into from time to time is that technology simply fails. The system that we were using at my church this weekend failed on Sunday morning. Worst time for it to fail ever. But we had the full service pre-recorded, so we were able to rebroadcast it later and then put it up for on demand. If all you've got is live, you've got right then and right there. You can have the internet go down, you can have a streaming service go down, you can have so many different things happen that recording ahead of time as if it's live will give the feeling of a live worship service while it may not be live in that moment.
Just another thing to add, a lot of platforms, I don't know about Facebook, but I know YouTube has an option now where you can premiere a pre-recorded video. And so what that means is you can record your video and then have it set to premiere, and it's set up almost as if it's live streamed. So there's a chat option. You can interact with people who are participating in the worship. Nobody can see it before, but people can all watch it kind of at the same time. It basically is like a weird amalgamation of both, but it allows you to have that kind of communal aspect of live streaming where everybody's kind of participating at the same time without having to worry about a lot of the technical aspects that you kind of run into. And I think Facebook has a similar option, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Maybe one of the other panelists would know.
I'm gonna call on Chris and Ben because you do both. I watched it twice this weekend. You do both.
If Facebook does have a watch party feature, they call it, where you can premiere a video in that way, but you have to be careful because there appears to be a time limit after the upload that they'll allow you to do that. So it's important.
And they'll hit you with a takedown. That's what we were experimenting with that, and because of some worship licensing stuff, one of Ben's songs was tagged as a copyright infringement, and we have licenses. But if
Facebook doesn't know that.
Too close, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So we do pre-recorded. We do pre-recorded and live. We've been kind of playing with both as things have been changing here. And we use the Church Online platform, which I'm guessing, Daryl, that's what you were using on Sunday too, because praise God, the church broke the internet on Sunday and nothing was working for anyone that was using the Church Online platform anyway. But yeah, so you can pre-record. It is a great idea because you can push that to YouTube or Facebook. Basically, the thing to think about is, where are your people? Like, what is the best way to talk to your people where they are? If most of your people are on Facebook and in community there, then go to them and post your video there. If you haven't done the online thing much, or your congregation doesn't get online very much, and Zoom might be a nice way to kind of introduce that live interaction, or something like YouTube where you can just send a link to your people and say, this is where you go to worship, leave a comment and do it that way. There's so many options, and really it's more about thinking about what your community, what's the best way to reach your community.
And I also think that in the encounters that we've had, the differences between our pre-recorded or what we call simulated live and kind of real-time live is the question of why, and the kind of interaction that we want to get out of the congregation that's there. And so Sunday mornings have been more interaction, because that feels more like Faith Point's mobile campus, that people just kind of talk whenever they want. But then But then on Saturdays and Wednesdays, the pre-recorded worship that we have for Common Table, we're able to have either a higher production value and showing more visuals of the illustrations, or we can have people from across the country coming and offering prayers or offering liturgy or songs, and they don't have to be in the same room. But because of the magic of time travel and video editing, we can make that happen in a way that feels seamless. And so your why kind of matters there as far as that.
I think it's good to just look at a multi-pronged approach to this, because you don't have to just pick one of these over the other. You can do different things that are going to reach different people. We're also just printing transcripts of the service and mailing them to the people without any internet access, to some of our shut-ins, the people over 90 who will never get on the computer, but that still connects them, and trying to come up with new ways. And I think Facebook is a good one to get people to share their prayer concerns, either as a private message if they don't want it published. And I do think it is important to realize that there are legalities involved with copyright, not just for songs. You have to have the license to do songs on YouTube, but you also have to be careful about the images that you project. If they're not copyright free, you're going to get cited for that as well.
Well, let's just jump into that for a second, because that has come up a couple of times. I know a lot of churches, what you have to keep in mind, for streaming music, you have to have 2 licenses. You have to have a copyright license that just allows you to project music in your sanctuary, something like the CCLI license. But then you also have to have an additional license for streaming. CCLI sells one license also sells one. I know one license is offering a free
temporary
subscription. And that's on the conference website of how to get that. Or I know some churches are just during this time only using public domain music just to be safe. Chris also and Ben also brought up, you can have the most wonderful licenses in the world that covers every piece of music you could ever think of. However, both YouTube and Facebook use a computer algorithm that does not care if you have a license. They're just looking, did Ben write this song that he's now singing? And instantaneously the computer says, no, he didn't. They flag their Facebook site. And after so many flags, they will shut their Facebook site down. And once you go into Facebook jail, it is hard to get out. How does anyone else work with the copyright license issues to make sure, I mean, we want to provide a service. We want to do this legally.
I think it's important to note too that Facebook right now is working with a reduced staff. So they've put their screening at a higher level. So a lot of things are getting kicked off because people keep saying, I posted something really innocuous and it got taken down. That's because they're running with a smaller staff right now. And I think people need to be aware that a lot of things are getting flagged that normally wouldn't even get flagged on Facebook.
I do want to bring your attention to the fact that Eric has posted on the conference website some detailed information in regard to the licensing and what you have to have. Eric, you want to chime in on that? Can't hear you.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Rodney. If you go to the conference website, bwcumc.org, and on our homepage, you will see 3 red buttons. Click on the one that says COVID-19 resources, and there is a page with a wealth of information, including a section on live streaming worship. And in that document, you will find information about some of the licenses and the copyright issues that we've been talking about here for the last few minutes. So again, that's bwcumc.org and coronavirus resources.
And I would say some churches are just posting the sermons. They're trying to bypass all of the copyright issues and just posting the sermons. Oh, good question. I'm going to start with Daryl to answer this question. How do I preach to an empty room? I'm used to having people in the pews. How do I preach to an empty room and have it come across as authentic?
That is really the first big leap when you start doing online worship in this way, because we're used to some level of human interaction, even if the people are just bumps on a log. All of us have somebody in our congregation that we look at that we know may smile or nod or have a twinkle in their eye, and it gives us some level of affirmation. You're not going to have that doing this sort of thing. So it depends on what you're dealing with. If you are doing it as a solo practitioner where it's just you, then you want to treat the camera like it's a person. And sort of, it means kind of changing sometimes your style to be able to go from lecturing to having more of what feels like a conversation. As if you're just kind of sitting there and talking to somebody and expressing your views. So it gives you a chance to sort of, what you want to do is make the moment more intimate, because one thing that you have to take into account is, from a technical standpoint, the sound in an empty room is very different if you're preaching the way you would normatively preach to a room that has 20, 30, 75, 500 people, however many people you usually have. The sound is very different. So you want to sort of practice having kind of a more intimate one-on-one conversation, which means kind of changing your language, changing how you use examples, not necessarily the examples that you use, but pretend you're talking to one or two friends, or that you're, and I don't know how many people do this because everybody does it, that you're on a FaceTime call and you're just kind of talking to a person. The other thing you can do that's kind of a cheat code, if you just need some human interaction, do some photocopies of faces and pin them to your pew and preach to them.
Yeah, there was a great picture where a priest did that. He had selfies of his whole congregation there. And I am not a manuscript preacher, but I preached from a manuscript Sunday because I've had a migraine for a few days and was taking allergy meds and was afraid I wasn't going to remember it. And it was awful because you cannot read into a camera. And I think that's going to be a challenge for people who generally do preach from a manuscript. To get the intimacy that Daryl's talking about is absolutely, I think, essential. Not to think that you're preaching to a room full of people, but you're trying to have a conversation, makes it more personal, which goes to some of the other things where people were asking questions about setting up a worship environment. If you're not going to, you can, I would just say make a small area, have some sort of, if you do the cross, the candles, and I've seen people encouraging on Facebook especially, their congregants to set up a worship area in their home as well. And I think that'll help people maybe to establish that we're doing things in a different way, but to make things as familiar as you can in spite of the differences is very helpful to people to help them connect.
Now, the other thing is, if you are a manuscript preacher, there are teleprompter apps that you can use. One of the better ones that I've had, I'm not sure which one.
There's Ben.
Hold that up again.
Yeah,
Hold
Ben.
that up, Ben. Let's see it.
So this is the Parrot teleprompter. If you're recording with a DSLR camera, which is, a digital photo camera that has a lens sticking out of the front of it, this little guy pops onto the front of the camera, and you can slide your cell phone right in there, and it reflects the screen. You can see my hand in there, so that you can actually type out your sermon. This is what I use to record sermons for Church Online. You can actually type out your sermon and have it scroll across the front of your camera so you can read it while you're preaching.
I'm going to interject because I've watched Ben twice now preach online, and I cannot tell you're reading it all from a teleprompter.
The magic of a teleprompter, yep.
And you practice, and I'll call out Eric. He and I have something in common. We both started in radio. And in radio, you have to imagine there's an audience. And I would say, would you say it's the same is true for those who are preaching online? You just have to use your imagination to imagine that you're preaching to more than just the camera.
I would agree with you, Bill. When I was in radio doing talk shows and things like that, I always imagined I was speaking to my wife, or because I needed to watch my language, to my mother. but I would imagine that that person was just on the other side of the glass wall or the bulletin board or whatever I was talking into, other than the microphone. But just imagine one person. So I like the idea that has been suggested that, you know, imagine that one person, put that picture up right in front of you and talk to that person, just in a conversational voice. That'll work.
Here's the brilliance of our webinar. Kathy, I'm going to give a shout out to Kathy, who, Rodney, let's get her name and contact information. This is what Kathy tells us. I do training with broadcasters speaking into a camera. You have to create an image in your mind of the demographic that you're speaking to. It just can't be any person or someone in your family. For example, if speaking to an older group, then imagine them. Imagine them in the setting in which they're listening to you. They're mostly at home on Sunday. Are they in their PJs? Even imagine what they might be eating. Someone was actually snoring during a sermon last Sunday. He hadn't muted. So maybe you need to boost your regular level of intonation. Good idea is to bring in some group photos. So that's from Kathy, one of our viewers tonight. Give credit where credit's due. I think maybe, Kathy, you've just worked your way into our communications team and committee here in the annual conference. So please know you will be getting, I'm sure you'll be getting a call.
Melissa's gonna call you.
But I want to also transition, because one of the, Selena's asking, we're now head to head with all the mega churches and super preachers in the world. How do we compete? First of all, we can't.
No.
That's there at a whole different level. But remember, every mega church pastor started as a single communicator, and they have experience, they have larger teams. So it is impossible for us to do that. We have to, the guidance of the previous question, focus on the audience that is before us. And that's where we begin to develop our very best communication skills. Preaching has evolved from the formal, and I'm not grammatically correct, from the formats that many of us were taught in seminary. If you're going to do media, you have to be a powerful communicator. And that's involving all of yourself, not just following a manuscript, not just following 3 points. You've got to develop all of yourself as a communicator. And so if you're worried about competing against someone, that's not necessarily the intent of what we're trying to do here. We really are trying to be in relationship with a particular audience. And as we learn those relationships in our congregation, then we'll discern what's the best way to get the message across to that particular group of people. So, and age groups are important. Age groups are important. Different age groups, we know different demographics, different characteristics. People hear things, they receive things. And you have to be relevant to that audience. You really do have to have a sense of where they are. If you're talking about long range and Tonto, and you got young people out there, they're not going to have a clue what you're talking about, because that's just not in their recent memory. So I think all of those things have to be incorporated in how we craft the message and how we seek to speak in a language that really resonates with that audience.
And to accept that this is
with
just
everything
weird.
that Rodney said. I'm sorry. Terry,
No,
you first?
Just understand that this is weird for all of us. We're not, we're in crisis mode. We're scared for our parents or grandparents or ourselves or children. We're going to make mistakes, but who hasn't made a mistake leading a worship service standing in front of a church full of people? So you just sort of have to let go of the anxiety with this and just go with it, because this is how we're going to be providing pastoral care right now. It's not just about preaching, it's about connecting to our congregants. And if this is the only way we have to do it, we got to learn how to do it this way.
Now, let me just say this. While I agree with everything that Terry and Rodney have both said, also we have to be mindful that the church truly has left the building. When we start using these other platforms, we can actually use them as evangelistic tool. So you also have to be mindful that someone may stumble across you that is not from your church, or somebody from your church may invite somebody who never would have set foot in your church to click on a YouTube link or to click on a Facebook Live. So don't think of yourself as competing against kind of the standard bearers of the business, but also remember, this is, all of us have said, if I could only reach. When we go digital, we have the opportunity to literally reach people that we would have never reached before, never reached in another way, and never had the opportunity to talk to if we were depending on them walking into our building. So we want to be cognizant that more important than anything else is being authentically you. Be who you are and just do that. People connect now to authenticity. If you try to be Andy Stanley, Craig Rochelle, Rod Parsley, pick your favorite person who has a great broadcast. If you try to be that, somebody will say, I can just go watch them. But if you are authentically you, sharing your authentic convictions, beliefs, and thoughts, people connect to that, but know that your audience may be very different than who you normally preach to, because anyone can find you now.
I will say too that just to piggyback off of what Ronnie and Daryl were just saying, is to not look at it as competing, but to look at it. One thing he said was the people in front of you. I look at what I do every Sunday, live stream or no live stream, as a service. This is not something we're competing against with each other, but we're serving the people who God has put in front of us, serving the people in our community. And I really look to those big church, and there's a big church not too far from our church, Bridgeway Community Church, and he was talking about relationships. Now, and I have relationships with people there, and I don't look, and I don't go to them with a competing mindset, but as a resource, like to pull from them. Hey, what are you doing that I could use to improve upon what I'm doing to serve the people who I am serving better? So definitely don't look at it as competing, but I would look to those big churches as a resource. See who you can get a relationship with, and not just use what God has given you to serve the people who are in front of you.
I would add, as somebody who has been participating as a viewer in online worship for the last few weeks, I appreciate what Matthew's pastor said at the beginning of their very first live broadcast. This is live, and you're going to hear all the mistakes that Matthew and the band are going to make. And then he followed that up by saying, and you're going to hear all the mistakes that I'm going to make. So being, as you were saying, Daryl, being authentic and giving people permission to realize that this is not a super rehearsed, super slick, super produced production. And then I'm going to go to the other end. I was worshiping with Faith Point and Common Table, who has been doing this for a few years, and they ran into some incredibly trying technical difficulties on Sunday, and just handled it as, hey, this happens, and we're doing the best we can. And what I saw happening with the people who were chatting online with them, grace was abounding.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people talking in the chat about like what to do when the services and systems you're using fail and what's a backup plan and stuff like that. And one of the things that I can't really stress enough is like some of this technology, the stability of it will be totally out of your control. And it's okay. Like there's you just kind of keep going. And so don't be afraid if the technology is not cooperating, postpone the service and try again later when it's not a peak time. Just get emails and phone calls out to your people that are participating and let them know what's going on. We have on Sunday morning, we were trying to broadcast on the Church Online platform and ended up pivoting to YouTube because the Church Online platform wasn't cooperating at the time because they were getting slammed because everybody and their mother is trying to do church on the internet right now. So just be patient with the technology and with yourself because there's a ton of people doing this right now. So
I will ask a quick question too, because I am one to say, I love live because of, the interaction. And this may be a question for Ben and Chris. Is that kind of a myth, for lack of a better word, that you can't be interactive if you don't have live and you do pre-recorded?
No, I don't think that's it at all. I mean, coming into this kind of grand experiment of Common Table, we knew that we couldn't be live every time we wanted to broadcast. But we also have this belief that there are ways to do church that haven't even been tried yet. And so we're trying to learn from everybody and create what we talk about as home church or house church, but online. And so if you just leave pauses, don't be scared of kind of dead air pauses, and just trust that you have people in the chat like we did. I mean, we built a community that will tell just absolute bad dad jokes or talk about their week. But if you just pause for a minute and then, for prayer requests, and then come back in, it's the community in the chat that's really driving the service forward. That's been shockingly similar to just like in-person worship. So if you have all the elements thoughtfully planned out, it's really a fantastic way. We have people singing in the chat, and it's simulated live. So it's a pretty cool experience. Ben, do you have anything to add?
Ben, I want to ask you, one of the questions is, could we have some discussion of the human/ministry aspects of doing services online? Translate that into English, please, sir.
Sure. Yeah, it's really important. It's easy. We've talked a little bit about preaching to an empty room and how to, compose yourself and handle yourself when you're just talking to a camera lens. It's really easy to lose track of the fact that there are other people there. They may not be there while you're recording it, but when you show or distribute this worship service in some way, there are people there who are going to be listening to it, are going to be affected by it. And so even though for the Common Table, we produce, the video elements of those services days, sometimes weeks in advance of when they're going to run, we know that when they run and when we have a community of people gathered to watch them, God's going to show up there too. It doesn't matter that we're not in a sanctuary doing it and that the sanctuary is kind of a virtual space. God shows up there and God moves, and we see that with the discussion that we have with folks in the chat, and we see that people are willing to be open and vulnerable in a place where most of the time people are only putting up the best pictures of themselves and the highlight reels of their lives. And so we've seen that we are able to do ministry and work with people and love people in this way in an online space that is really authentic and really works. And it doesn't have to be sterile just because it's on the internet.
So Ben, how do you handle things like prayer requests and HIPAA regulations or privacy when you're trying to engage people in your online worship?
Sure. Well, for prayer requests, we make it very clear that, people are welcome to share any public prayer requests that they have in the chat. That's fine. They can do that. If we are worshiping at our online campus at commontable.online, we have a live prayer feature where if somebody has a prayer request that they do not want to share publicly, they can click on that, and that connects in a private chat to somebody who is a Common Table pastor or a host for that service to allow them to interact with that person one-on-one and share those prayer requests. And we also accept prayer requests via email for things that folks don't want to share publicly.
And if they're, well, I'm gonna cut you off because I always do that. But I think that some of the things too are that if we get a private prayer request, one of the things that we try to do is make it not about us, but about connecting people to people. And so if we know that that person has a home church or a need, and they say, I have an upcoming surgery that I need prayer for. Some of the questions that we ask are, do you have a home church? Is there somebody that you would like this? And then can we share that information with that person? So they meet us virtually, but then somebody shows up in that hospital room with them to pray with them and to give them comfort, because we're trying to build those kind of lasting connections. And so like HIPAA laws, if we have their approval and their go ahead, fantastic. If it's private, then we don't put that on our larger church prayer list. It's just for kind of the pastoral team that's working together. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we handle some of those pieces.
I think it would be great with the, with Ben and Chris, are you going to publish how to get to their Common Table website so people can actually look at some of these things and see what's being done? I think that would be helpful rather than trying to imagine it. to just go and check out and see what different churches are doing. And I know there was a question here about having an open group or limiting it to just church members. I encourage people to share the links to our worship on their Facebook pages or in their social media. And I've actually heard from pastors in other denominations with smaller congregations who say, we don't have the technical capability of doing this. Is it okay if I share this with my members so we can worship with you right now? And I think, we're not trying to steal each other's members away, but right now it's connecting people as best we can.
I have a colleague who has an office next to me who continually reminds me of the question, who will do this with me? So Dr. Smothers, what Terry is saying, how do we look beyond our own limits and to partnerships, particularly during this time? What do you recommend?
We are connectional and we should be covenantal. And since we are now living in an environment where relevant stuff is digital, downloadable, and available on demand, we really do have to start thinking differently and asking that question, who will do this with me? Or has someone else already done this? And is there a good model? When you're introducing this type of technology to people, a picture is really worth 1,000 words. Sometimes you can just say, hey, look, let's look at how somebody else is doing this as an example of how we can do this. And, as a pastor who's now approaching, many years in ministry and done a couple of building programs, when we started talking about new building programs, I've tried to put folks on a bus and take them to a church that has done a building program so that they could see, they could touch, they could walk around and experience what that looks like. Because you can talk about it, forever, but when people are actually able to see it, it changes their perspective of how it fits for them. Relevant communication combined with relevant relationships is our goal. We're trying to build relationships. We will never be the same as a church. When I say the church, I'm not just talking about our denomination. What we are experiencing now has already shifted. The reality is some of our congregations will not survive what we're going through now. And we have to begin to ask and learn. That's why we've invited these folks to this panel. What is working? What do we need to release? And how do we come alongside and become good students of some of these techniques? I want to shift before we go because our time is there, because we've had several questions, though, about giving. And people are really interested in how, what people are using to connect people with giving. How do you hook that up? How do you promote it and all those stuff? So anybody that wants to jump in there and talk about online giving, please do so, panel.
Well, online giving is the tricky part. It's got to be something that's easy and accessible. So it depends on the culture of your church. If your church has an online giving platform, transferring it to online is very easy. If your church doesn't have an online giving platform, you've got to, one, communicate to people what you're doing, how it works, and most importantly for many people, that it's a secure way to give. Many times people are confused and concerned about, if I do this online, will it really get to the church? So you've got to be able to convince people that it's secure and make it as easy as possible. There are a lot of platforms that you can use. There are some that are available through the United Methodist Church. Vanco, for one, is a United Methodist Church entity, but there are some non-United Methodist Church entities that work very well. And what you want to be able to do, especially when you're doing this online, is as best you can embed it into what you're doing so that it's just a click away. So people don't have to, if you're asking people to watch a broadcast, go to another window, come back to another window, you lose people in that process because they feel like they're missing something. But if you can make it clickable so that while they're watching, they can click on something, fill out an easy form, and give, that works. So it's really, you kind of have to think about it from not what you're presenting, but if you were viewing, how would that work mentally for you? And embedding is the best thing that you can do.
Are those resources of the different giving options available on our website, Melissa
They are.
or Rodney? Okay. Oh, Melissa's muted.
Yes, they are.
I also noticed, I'm going to pick on Chris because you all have text to give.
We do, yeah. We've used a couple of different sources, but with this whole idea that we want to decrease the barriers for people to give, especially for the first time, because once they, kind of dip a toe into the water, that's the hardest step. And so we have a text to give service, we have an online giving platform, and a couple of other different ways. But the first text to give that we used was through a service called Kindred, Kindred, I think. And so that was the first one. And then our church management software, Breeze, came out with another one that was more inclusive for all of those bits. But our people have been pretty flexible with that, because that's a natural thing for them to either pay bills online, and so they can make a gift online via text message. They can, and then once it's in your phone, you just text the dollar amount, and it's maybe 15 seconds that it takes. But then for online worship, then we'll often put a banner down below our video window. You click that, and just like Daryl was talking about with the transparency, they want to make sure that their gift is allocated towards the online campus. And so we make sure that it's automatically selected for the online campus account. But Tithely is another one that's really good, because you can do, I think, text to give, online giving, and a giving kiosk, like just through an iPad. That makes it super simple, and they are fantastic to work with. And all of them take, just a little bit of transaction fees and things like that. But whenever it's brought up, it's, I gave $100, but only 97.6 got in. But that's still 97.6 that we didn't have before.
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, I was worshiping in one of the churches of our annual conference. The offering came around. I forgot this little thing called a checkbook. Forgot to bring it.
What's that?
It's this ancient device used for writing money to people. So
When dinosaurs were on the earth.
on my phone, I went to their website. I could give, but they gave me an option. Would you like to give a little extra amount to defer the cost of the processing fee? I easily said, yep, that's a little bit more. But so there are ways to make up for any fears of losing income.
Right.
I want to.
PayPal has two ways to give, apparently. You have to be very careful when you set up, if you do it on PayPal, that you do it as a donation instead of just a regular payment, because the fees are different. Because we use that for paying for our preschool is on PayPal.
Now, somebody is asking, is there any way to pay from Facebook?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what would that way be?
And so if you're, we set up a nonprofit that you can donate to, and one of the benefits about that, and there's a process that through, I think Facebook requires you to kind of fill out a couple of forms, and it's not hard. You may need a GuideStar site on there, which is just a kind of database of nonprofits, and it's really not too difficult for that. I or somebody else could help walk you through that. But then Facebook, as part of their kind of give back program, will take those transaction fees and pay them for you oftentimes. And so you see that even $100 when really they pay those transaction fees. So Facebook's another way. If you're doing Facebook Live online and you get that set up, you can have donate links right there.
Now, there's something you said, Rodney, that I want to circle back to. You said that our information needs to be relevant information and relationships. Now, somebody asked the question, how do we keep people coming back to our churches once they've experienced all of the different opportunities to watch online or on their television sets? Would you say it's relationships that bring people back to us?
It's relationships and relevance.
Okay.
People, we live in a society where people have so many places where they connect. You know, people can hardly sit still long enough to watch a show on TV. So they get it off their tablets, they get it off their phones, they get it from so many other places. We have to really begin to ask, what is that unique way that God wants to use this particular ministry to touch people's lives? And so sometimes we err on trying to be all things to all people. You know, I always laugh when people say, well, Smothers, we want to get young people in the church. And I go, give me the average age of the people that are there. And they say, well, you know, our youth group is 75 and above. So I'm saying that's, you know, you're probably not going to have an immediate attraction to people who have 3-year-olds. So be realistic. So the other thing is that our websites in general need to be cleaned up. They are too cluttered. They're irrelevant. They're just simply glorified electronic newsletters for us. They're not designed. They have information, but they are not invitational. I think the other thing about our worship, and somebody said it very well, we have to think of our worship as something invitational. It's not just for the people who are there. It is for a broader audience that will be attracted. There are people who support ministries around the world who never step in the doors simply because something that is said or related is invitational. The gospel is supposed to be anchored in an invitation to a relationship, not just supporting our particular brand. And when I say brand, our local church's thing. I believe that people like Chris and Ben, who've been doing this in a very creative way, Daryl and Matthew and Terry, are the communicators that are out there discovering that. I don't think there's one way to do it. I think there are multiple ways to come at it. And one of the things I don't want our audience to leave with, you don't start with perfection. You start with a call. This is a calling, just like any other ministry. Everybody can't do video ministry. You have to be called to it. God has to bring you the disciples that are committed to it, people who are willing to journey and learn about it, and people who are willing to experiment and not afraid to make mistakes, people who are willing to look beyond just what we are familiar with and do it in some creative ways. And all of that takes that community of who will do this with me. And so it's an opportunity. It certainly is a new evangelistic approach. We don't use that E word much, but I want to close and then give Bill these last few moments. Our ultimate task is to make disciples of Christ. And that's not a simple task. We're trying to introduce people to a relationship that will be so contagious that they will want to come alongside and say, hey, you know, I don't know what you got, but I want some of that. And that's what we have to keep ever before us. We all know that sometimes the power of a communion service can do something for folk that a sermon would never do, or a song, or a prayer, or creative dance, or some other thing, because people's needs are all over the place. And right now in the midst of this, I think creativity is our friend. We don't all have to do the same thing. Brother Bill?
Thank you, sir. I want to we've got like a really short amount of time. So thank you to our panelists for coming in. I know we just scratched the surface and there's a lot more we can go deeper. So I'm going to put the plug out. First, I'm going to give Chris and Ben a plug. live.commontable.online is your website. If you want to experience a hybrid of pre-recorded live worship, please visit Common Table online, or you can go through faithpointum.org.
Yep.
And find their information that way. It's live.commontable.online. So that's a great way to do it. Also, keep tuned in. Starting next Tuesday, God willing, we will go back to our regular Training Tuesday schedule. Today was our special Training Tuesday on a Monday. So next Tuesday, the 31st of March, we plan to go back to our regular Training Tuesday schedule. And we've gotten some great ideas through our Q&A of what you all need in terms of training. So we'll look at that after we're offline. And last but not least, Terry, would you please send us forth in prayer?
Certainly. Holy God, in these days of absolute terror, days where we don't know what's coming next, in these days when we're told to expect the worst, teach us always to hope in you. You are eternal. You are our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. You will be with us. You will get us through this valley. You will join us together electronically or when we cannot be in person. So bless each person who tuned in tonight. Give them the courage to try something new, because our goal is always the same: to share your love with everyone we meet or everyone we contact, even virtually these days. So bless us now and fill us with your spirit, that we might serve you joyfully and abundantly in Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. This recording will be available for rebroadcast. So for those of you who did not have everyone in the room you wanted, please watch the Baltimore-Washington Conference website, and we will soon have this up for a later viewing. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you all. God bless you. And stay tuned for future trainings that will be produced through our e-connection reminders and on the website and Facebook. So we will remind you. God bless you. Thank you to our panelists. Bless you all. And thank you for leading us forward. So have a good evening. God bless.
Thanks, Bill. Nice meeting you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.